Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's session of the Health Tech Entrepreneurs Meetup. Our speaker today is Kellyanne, and the topic is Perspectives from the Intersection of Engineering, Regulatory Strategy, and Commercialization of Medical Devices. So the Health Tech Entrepreneurs Meetups is a space where we can learn how to apply concepts that we're learning from webinars and seminars and office hours to real life. So this is a great chance for everyone to discuss their own experiences and share tips and advice. So if there's anything you'd like to hear about, or if you'd like to speak about a topic for future meetups, please let me know. Also, please keep sending me feedback. We've evolved quite a bit from when we first started doing these over a year ago. We also have a Slack workspace, so let me know if you'd like to join. A few new items that we started recently. We're doing a monthly MDC newsletter series. So if you'd like to get on the mailing list, let me know. We also have a YouTube channel where we upload our recordings from the meetups, and I also do interviews with our clinical partners and other experts in the field. So yeah, please keep sending feedback. I would also, hold on. I was supposed to have our list of sponsors up. Hold on, please. So we have sponsors now as well. So if you would like to sponsor these meetups, please let me know, and you will be advertised at all the meetups. Yes, and people are coming in as well. So let me share this. So yes, thank you to our sponsors. TEDCO is a sponsor, also Cooley, a law firm, Fulton Bank, which is helping a lot of us startups in the bio and medical technology fields, and the MDC Studio. All right. So I like to do our usual meet and greet. So if I'm going to go down the list of names to my right. So if I call your name and you'd like to introduce yourself, please unmute and tell us who you are, what you're working on, anything you want to ask for, or any help you can provide. So I can start. Hi, my name's Neo. I'm a founder and CEO of Neurosonics Medical, a startup where we're trying to develop a novel ultrasound device for minimally invasive neurosurgery. I'm also the vice president of business development at the MDC Studio, which is a startup studio in Baltimore focusing on building health and medical technology companies. I also recently started as a senior analyst at the new MDC Verte Impact Fund, which is a new venture fund investing in medical and biotechnology companies in opportunity zones. All right, Abe?
Yes, hi, my name is Abraham Diaz. I'm an entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur to be doing an MBA currently at Hopkins University Carey Business School, focusing on entrepreneurship for medical sciences directed to medical devices. And I'm also the only founder for Cosmos Medical LLC, a company that is hoping to develop technologies for new baby incubators that are born premature, to bring in new technologies for their survival. Thank you.
Great, thank you. John Kay?
Hi, yes, I'm Jonathan Klaus. I work actually at University of Maryland Medical Center. I just finished my MBA, and she's looking into new companies and that kind of thing. So just interested to see what everyone has to say.
Awesome, thank you and welcome. Catherine Reed? All right, we'll skip that. Danielle? Okay, we'll skip Danielle. Skipping Gil. Hamid?
Hi now, good afternoon. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. My name is Hamid Badi. I'm with West Virginia University. I'm in technology transfer and have been in the life sciences healthcare space for the past decade now. I assist with all commercialization activities coming up from MedTech. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm going to skip Kellyanne. KJ?
Hey everybody, my name is KJ and I am a partner success manager at PieSoft. And PieSoft, we make software development easy as pie. We work with a lot of startups in the healthcare and IT. Good to meet everybody.
Great, thank you. Leor?
Hi, everyone. I'm currently finishing my PhD in Hopkins in biophysics, doing some machine learning, inference algorithms, etc. But I come from the kind of laser optic industry, and I want to kind of fuse these two things into diagnostics and medical devices kind of when I graduate, hopefully in the next few months. So looking for opportunities. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Naveed?
Hi everyone, my name is Naveed Google. I'm founder of Yektasonics. We develop therapeutic ultrasound phase arrays for non-invasive applications. I'm located here in Arizona and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, good to see you again. Paul? All right, we'll skip Paul. Stuart?
Hi, everybody. My name is Stu. I'm working right now as the presidential fellow at Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures. Previously, I studied Parkinson's in a neurodegeneration lab at the School of Medicine for about 10 years. And I work very closely with Kellyanne, so excited to hear more about her FDA experience, but I've heard a lot so far, and it's very good stuff, so.
Awesome, welcome. Ty?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ty. I'm currently a PhD student in biomedical engineering at the University of California, Irvine.
Oh,
And,
welcome.
Yeah, my main research interest is to develop a novel wearable devices for the healthcare. And I have been working on the feeders monitoring system for a few years and aiming to spin out a startup company from that project. Nice to meet you
Wonderful,
all.
welcome. Wayne?
Evening, everybody. Wayne Sternberger. I'm a co-founder and CTO of BlockSynop, relatively new startup that is putting together commercialization for a neural blockade monitor that was developed combination of Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and APL. I'm on professional leave of absence from APL now after spending 40 years there as a systems engineer. And I'm very interested in FDA clearance information, considering we're going through that right now. Thank you.
Awesome. And Chrissy?
Hi, I'm Chrissy. I'm a postdoc at Hopkins right now. And we have a couple different platforms that we're working on for ultra-sensitive detection of biomarkers. So we are applying it to both ovarian cancer detection as well as bacterial detection directly from blood.
Awesome, thank you. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself? Stephen might be busy. All right, Brent, would you like to introduce yourself?
I literally popped in.
Yes.
How are we introducing ourselves? Just, hi, I'm Brent.
Yeah, just let us know who you are, what you're working on.
Yeah. Hey, I'm Brent. I'm building a care delivery platform. Kind of think of it as like Wagger Rover, but for kids on the spectrum. And it goes beyond that by there's a wearable smartphone component for assessing anxiety for the kiddos to basically say like how effective is the care going.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Yeah, I see Paul and Danielle now. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, I had a mic issue, so I just wanted to make sure. My name is Paul Moss. I'm at the Erickson School, Aging Services, UMBC, and dealing with the intersection of IoT, telehealth, and long-term services and supports for aging, and looking at emerging companies looking into that space as well.
Wonderful.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle. Sorry, I was trying to get better internet connection, but I'm a PhD student at Hopkins, and I'm one of the co-founders of NovaCup, which is a student-run startup trying to design better period products. some of which are medical devices. So right now, I want to say we're like tentatively moving out of pre-seed into seed stage and trying to figure out our IP strategy and how to navigate the FDA. So that's why I'm especially excited about this talk today.
Awesome, thank you. Great. Anyone else who hasn't introduced themselves? All right. Okay, I'll hand it off to Kellyanne. So Kellyanne has a very interesting background combining bioengineering, regulatory research at the FDA. She's also a regulatory consultant. She has experience in assessing IP through JHTV, Johns Hopkins Technology Ventures, and she's also a nursing student. So she has got an undergraduate degree in bioengineering from University of Maryland. She assessed medical devices at the FDA for over 10 years. She's now a master's student at the Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing, and she's a Commercialization Academy Fellow at JHTV, where she evaluates intellectual property and regulatory market landscapes of novel inventions coming out of Johns Hopkins. So this is Kellyanne, I'll hand it off to you now. It's really interesting because you have such you don't have a traditional career path, and it seems like you've just been following your interests and passions around translational research and medical devices.
Yeah, for sure. And also I want to say thank you so much, Nao, for inviting me to talk today. And thanks everyone for joining for this talk. I'm really excited to be here. And I've joined for a few in the past, so I think it's just a great forum for everyone to chat about different topics related to translation and tech development. So, and I do apologize in advance. I have a little bit of a cough, so occasionally I might mute if I'm trying to anticipate a cough and don't want to blow your ears out. So, but either way, sorry for that in advance. But also now, can I share my screen?
Yes, I just made you the host, so you should be able to share.
Cool. Share screen. Let me just. Okay, can you guys all see my screen okay?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. And also, if anyone wants to interrupt with to let me know if there's anything in the chat, just let me know, because I unfortunately can't see the chat right now. But yes, as Nao mentioned, she actually already gave a really nice background of my experience so far. So I don't really want to waste too much time on that right now. But you can see on the slide more details related to the different positions I've held and kind of the trajectory I've been on so far. I'll just move right on to maybe it's a little bit of a forced habit for my previous life in FDA, but I did want to explicitly state that the opinions expressed in this discussion don't reflect the views of the FDA or the US government. I guess I can give a little bit more background too as to the reason why I got into nursing in my current stage, and that's because it's really been a long-standing interest of mine to provide patient care. But like Nao described, I'm still very interested in engineering and medical technology development. So that's why I got involved with JHTV while being in school, and I'm trying to stay in touch with all of this despite pursuing a pretty seemingly different field. But aligned with that interest and goal, I'm here today to provide you all a few informal tips related to the regulatory process and working with FDA. I also want to note that the majority of the tips I'll provide today mostly relate to medical devices, not drugs or biologics. So it did sound like a lot of the attendees here are interested in medical devices. But I'll try my best to also interlace some of the perspectives that I've learned so far in my recent pursuits. I acknowledge that I am still in nursing school and I'm still pretty new to the commercialization space. And I also personally haven't experienced all the pains you all might be going through right now to develop your own ideas. But that's also why I'm here. I'm really interested to hear your perspectives and the type of challenges that you've been going through. So feel free to interject with any questions, some of your experiences, or we can definitely discuss them a little bit more at the end as well. I also wanted to describe that An overreaching theme that that will kind of relate to all the tips that I'll give today was actually brought up by a previous speaker at one of these meetups, and I definitely agreed with this theme that he had recommended, and that is that it's important to remember that tech transfer, research, regulation, consulting, as well as healthcare, it's all a human process, and with humans, it's pretty difficult to make anything uniform, predictable. There's gaps in processes and communication. We're all different, and we also will interpret the same piece of information in different ways. So I think it's important for us to give each other and ourselves wiggle room, patience, and grace to acknowledge that inventing a new idea is going to take a really long time, and then it's really important to be flexible, as well as acknowledge that we're going to make mistakes that we can learn from. And I hope some of these thoughts that I share today will help prepare you for some of those situations, at least as it relates to the FDA. And so I'll get started with my first tip and my first story that will also give you a little bit of a glimpse as to why I decided to go back to school, to nursing school. So sex sells, and maybe it sells in the medical device industry. I'm not really quite sure, actually, and I haven't done that type of market analysis. And that's actually not the point that I'm trying to make. But I was including this eye-catching phrase in hopes to introduce my first tip, which is to look at the clinical and patient perspectives early in the development of your device or idea. The reason I say that is because I used to review medical devices used in the neurology, physical medicine, and rehabilitation space. And because of my previous regulatory research, I was heavily involved in reviewing pre-market submissions related to brain-computer interface systems. And I actually was involved with the draft implanted BCI guidance document that FDA issued and finalized earlier this year. And as a result, I've always been very highly interested in this cutting edge field and felt like it had a great potential for impact. And BCI, if you don't know, but BCI systems are often intended for restoring limb function, either upper or lower limbs in tetraplegic, paraplegic, or amputee populations. And now I'd like to ask you all, if you were to lose your ability to use your arms or your legs, what would you think would be the first thing that you'd want back? Well, I would guess that maybe, yeah, that you would want your hands, like your function of your hands or your legs, whatever limb function you lost, you'd want back. Well, surprisingly, I learned, sorry, I'm trying to get my slide. The one slide I made fancy. Okay, there we go. So I wanted to share with you that I was also surprised and intrigued to learn in a workshop that there are things called patient preference studies. And one specifically found that paraplegic patients actually identified sexual function and urinary function as a higher priority for them to regain over the ability to walk. In other conferences, some clinicians would tell me that they thought BCI technology was really cool, but they would actually never consider it for their patients. And PTs also would reveal that many of their patients were resilient and adapted to whatever function they had left. So they could actually be independent in many ways that we didn't realize. And even in my short time in nursing school, I've had a chance to care for tetraplegic patients who were admitted into the hospital for issues like autonomic dysreflexia, as well as UTIs and pressure ulcers. All these issues that we forget are things that this patient population is having a tough time dealing with. So hearing and seeing these patient and clinical perspectives have been really eye-opening for me. It actually even made me question the impact of BCI systems when I was at FDA, but it also made me hope that there's someone out there doing the research to address these concerns. And maybe one of you guys can be that person. And I am aware there's maybe some studies out there looking into like regenerative medicine and such, but yeah, I hope that someone's out there working on it. And I think that if you're developing medical products, I really recommend finding ways to get in touch with the patient and clinical perspectives in some way, whether it's through customer discovery efforts, looking into patient preference studies, as well as collaborating with healthcare professionals to maximize the impact of your idea and also prevent roadblocks down the line. I've heard that it can be difficult sometimes to get clinical stakeholders on board with an idea. Just as I mentioned, there were clinicians who told me that they would never suggest BCI to some of their patients. But it's good to start early and to find those ways so they can also help advocate for your device in the future. And I'll move on to my next tip, which is to strive for intuitive device design with clear labeling. So FDA reviews the labeling for medical devices. This includes advertising materials as well as the instructions for use. In those situations, sometimes you will get into what seems like a super tedious discussion on making revisions to your labeling. And the sections of your labeling that can be most important to ensure the safety and effectiveness of your device are the instructions, as well as precautions, warnings, and contraindication statements. And you may be aware, and I came to learn that FDA was also aware of this, that labels are not always carefully reviewed in the real world as much as we would like them to be. And I mean, who can admit that we've thrown away whatever like pamphlet comes in whatever device that we end up buying, even if it's a consumer product. But I think, and I also can attest to this in my short time in nursing school, that I have not seen the instructions for use for various general hospital devices that I've used. But I don't want that to become any excuse for not creating clear labeling and including as much information as possible. It's in the best interest of everyone to have this great comprehensive labeling, because you can help prevent human factor errors as well as adverse events and really protect a company from different liabilities. So I think that that's something that, again, it could become a very tedious discussion sometimes, but it's very important to pay attention to, I think. But I also want to use this as an opportunity to emphasize and challenge everyone to really optimize their device design and make it as intuitive and easy to use as possible. This can really draw back to my first point related to understanding the user expectations while you're designing your product. Let's see. Excuse me. And the next tip is trying to prepare for each step of the translational process and accept that they are very different processes. I understand that the general translation process might include some of these agencies noted on the slide, and these are primarily government agencies, but I understand that there's plenty of others involved. But it can include, patent application, applying for funding, building a prototype, collecting data, as well as maybe starting a company or trying to find someone to license it to, and then submitting to the FDA. And then after that, trying to get some reimbursement from health insurance companies. This all might be done either sequentially or simultaneously when possible. And each step really is a beast on its own to deal with. But one seemingly simple thing I want to emphasize is that it's good for you to try not to reuse patent application documents, grant applications, marketing pitches, or any other type of document in your submission to FDA, and vice versa. I know it's tempting because, and you might be surprised at how common it actually is, because the background information that you provide for all these documents are very similar, but it can also open up a lot of unnecessary questions and confusion from the FDA. For example, the claims that you seek in a patent are often much more broad and different than what you end up proposing as your indications for use to the FDA. So if the FDA sees a patent application in the submission, they will get confused about your device and also ask more and more questions and potentially ask for more data. There's also programs at FDA like the Parallel Review Program that aims to streamline patient access to innovative products by reviewing pre-market submissions simultaneously with the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services or other healthcare insurance providers. This program can definitely be very appealing. And while it's helpful, I'll note it is very selective. And it also is important to understand that health insurance companies often are looking for different endpoints in studies than FDA. So it's just important to keep this in mind when you're designing clinical trials and any other type of data that you would be submitting potentially in an FDA application. And next, I'd like to remind everyone to try to be flexible. I know I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but it's really important to be flexible and to collaborate with FDA when you work with them on a submission. It's quite possible and often that the proposed indications for use for your device will change throughout the regulatory process, unless you were to pursue a 510K pathway and propose an indications for use that's exactly identical to another marketed device. But even then, there are some times where you might do that, but then you provide other information and then it kind of makes FDA reconsider whether that's the appropriate indications for use for you. So either way, and like I mentioned then, FDA tends to work with you to find an indication for use that reflects the information that you provide and that demonstrates that your device is safe and effective, or if it's similar to a specific regulatory landscape for your device. So on the slide, I just kind of given some examples of the transition between wording. So if you want to claim that your device treats cancer, which is kind of a big claim, the word treat tends to require a lot more data. And when you provide a study that actually looks rather at like quality of life or relief of symptoms, then that's what FDA is going to see that you provided. And then there could be some iterative process of revising your indications for use to reflect what your study shows. So that's where it'll go from treating X to relieving symptoms of X, for example. And another example here noted on the slide is the term biopsy isn't always going to be synonymous with diagnosis. So it's just really thinking at what the words mean in your indications for use. Okay, let's see. And now I'll rattle off a collection of additional and simple ways to make your submission successful. And before I get into that, those noted on the slide, I wanted to take a few minutes to humanize the FDA process for you a little bit. So when you submit to CDRH, your submission will be assigned to a lead reviewer who essentially acts as a project manager for your file. So they will be the point of contact that you're always interacting with. They'll be the ones organizing the documentation, both internal and external, as well as any meetings that would occur internally or externally. They also, oftentimes, like myself, I was a lead reviewer for the majority of my time at the FDA. So they often have a technical background and will review part of your submission as well. And they'll review it with a team of consult reviewers. So those consult reviewers can include biocompatibility experts, microbiologists for sterility. They can also include electrical safety experts, electromagnetic compatibility, stats, as well as clinical. And once questions or decisions are made across the entire team, those questions and those decisions go through multiple levels of management concurrence. And so pre-market reviewers can be working on anywhere between 4 to 20-ish submissions at a time, in addition to doing other ancillary activities like guidance document development or standards research, as well as other working groups, or like the clinicians oftentimes are working part-time in the clinic as well. But these experts are devoted really to their regulatory service, and they're super excited about innovation, and they have the shared mission with you all to get these ideas to the market as quickly as possible. And so with all that in mind, I wanted to provide some tips when you're submitting to FDA. The first one I suggest is looking at a calendar and calculating the projected deadline for your submission type. and trying to be available to answer questions. I understand that it's super exciting and a huge accomplishment to finish that submission and to send it off to the FDA and you just want to relax. But keep in mind that that's actually when FDA is just starting their work. They're working up against a clock to assemble a team, and each reviewer will do their part. And then these review timelines, for example, the 510K timeline is 90 days. So those are actually 90 calendar days. And so as a result, that can mean that your deadline, day 90, could land on a weekend or a holiday. And so oftentimes, the review teams try to get it done before those dates, but if it's necessary, they will work up until or on that day, that weekend or that holiday to get it done. And the thing is that it's kind of sad, but sad to note that there are many times that I worked on a submission around the holidays towards the end of the year and sent questions to the companies or the investigators and either had no response from them, or they had told me that their company had shut down for the holidays and that no one was available to answer these questions. So what happens is that FDA can actually issue an unfavorable decision on your submission for lack of response. So it's good to try to avoid wasting the thousands of dollars that you end up submitting on a submission by just not responding. So I think that that's, and I understand it's a time crunch because, there are certain milestones that you all have to reach as well. But just keep in mind, if there's ways for you to have someone available for questions around those times, and that's a good way to go. Another tip is also to provide justifications in your submission or communications with FDA. And sometimes you might get questions that seem very obvious to you or burdensome in some way, but it's important to remember that the FDA is seeing your device for the first time in the form of words and images on a screen. So they sometimes will struggle to understand what you're presenting to them. And they are definitely open to hearing your clarifications and justifications to better understand your thinking behind certain things, like why you may or may not have provided certain testing, or why you might have picked or not picked to include some technical characteristic in your product. So once they hear you out, it's always very possible that their concern may change or even dissipate. Also, I definitely recommend trying to communicate with the FDA before you do major bench, animal, and clinical studies. Many companies send data in a pre-market submission before seeking feedback in a pre-submission. And so this can result in FDA actually requesting very different data. For example, a longer study or a more recent study with more time points, or even a different outcome measure, as well as a study using a more finalized version of the device and not an earlier prototype that might have slight technical differences. So it's really a time saver to try to work with FDA early on identifying what type of tests and certain characteristics about those tests that you might want to consider. And excuse me, and since I'm on the topic of testing topics, I think it's very important and helpful to start getting familiar with different standards, consensus standards that could apply to your device. And so I listed a few technical areas that almost always apply to almost every device, which is biocompatibility, sterility, electromagnetic compatibility, and electrical safety. And I think the last one I have here is to get acquainted with the FDA processes if you're not already. And there's very different ways that you can do that independently and before considering a consultant, really. Oftentimes, if you just Google your search term with FDA or CDRH, you really might stumble upon some resource, some FDA website, a guidance document, a webinar that could address your question. There's really a lot of FDA resources out there. And also some of these resources are also available through a platform that FDA shares it through, which is called CDRH Learn, as well as the Division of Industry and Consumer Education. So they are actually a group that is intended to try to field questions from anyone who has questions about the regulatory process, even if they haven't submitted a product, if they have, and things like that. So they're a good place to start if you have some preliminary questions as well. And so this slide is definitely busy, and it's mostly just to provide some list of resources that might help you get started on understanding resource or FDA processes a little bit more. And if all of this isn't too relevant for you at this point, I'll be just as happy if you walk away from this talk, but even with the slightest interest in pursuing job opportunities at FDA or somewhere in tech transfer or even healthcare. So I'd be happy to talk with you about it sometime. But I've also included just some quick tips for a career aspiration if you're interested in translational work. And they're probably very similar to ones you've heard before, but I do want to emphasize that networking and collaborating with people inside and outside your field is very, very valuable. And really, I wouldn't be here and where I am today if I hadn't networked and worked with people. I'm extremely thankful to all those people who've helped me throughout my professional trajectory. And actually, like, some of them are on this call. so it's really great. And also, I did want to suggest working on improving and just honing in on your communication skills in any form, whether it's oral or written. This can really help avoid miscommunications, waste of time. I think it's just a really valuable skill to develop, as well as, if possible, if you can build some legal, regulatory, and business skills, either through a degree or just informally, I think that will be really beneficial as well. So with that, I think that concludes my talk. Oh, this was just a quick plug-in for a company that I have done some freelance consulting with on the side, but they primarily focus on AI technologies, so you can check them out if you're interested. And I just want to say thank you again, and I have my email there and my LinkedIn, and I welcome any questions or experiences that you want to share.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kellyanne. And I can vouch that I've worked with Kellyanne as a regulatory consultant, and she has been super helpful to my startup, Neurosonics Medical. So yeah, does anyone have any questions for Kellyanne? Oh yes, Naveed.
Yeah, I have this question that basically on the if a part is an OEM and wants to be used inside other medical devices, that OEM part, does that need serious FDA regulatory path, or as long as it's replacement of the existing parts, that FDA regulation is easier?
Can you remind me again what OEM stands for? Sorry.
If it is one part inside the other part, for example, in our case, we develop therapeutic ultrasound, it goes inside other medical devices. So
I see.
If that part, that one piece inside the other pieces.
Well, I think it depends, and I don't know if I can give you definitive feedback of whether it would definitely be regulated by FDA or not. But I do think that certain components of a product are regulated and sometimes aren't. I'd have to look at it a little bit more to clarify, but I think oftentimes if it really is just like a small part that just contributes to like an electronic component, you know what I mean? Oftentimes it's not, but the actual product would have to be meeting the definition of a medical device, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it's, and I can't even rattle it off the top of my head super well, but it's just like if it's diagnosing or changing the structure and function of the human body and things like that. So, or treating or diagnosing and such. But I'm trying to understand or make sure. I just want to clarify that yes, I think that would need some additional information just to make that decision.
Yeah, something Kellyanne's helped me to understand is that, for example, for my device, whether it's 510K or PMA class 1, which class, it's not as black as white as I thought it would be. Any other questions?
Yeah, and I can stop sharing as well.
I have a question, Kellyanne. So when and how did you decide when to switch, what you were doing in your career?
Let's see. I think. Well, in terms of pursuing nursing, it mostly depended on when I could finish my prereqs, as well as life stage. So I did want to try to go back before pursuing other interests in my personal life. but in terms of transitioning from, say, regulatory science and research to the regulatory field, I would say it kind of was just happenstance in terms of like talking to people who had said there were openings in the pre-market space at FDA. If you're interested in applying, you should consider it. So I definitely try to take advantage of those opportunities when they came up. And that's exactly how I became a reviewer at FDA. And in terms of my movement within FDA as well, I think it was mostly guided too by just me trying to learn new things at FDA and trying to build and understand other processes there other than pre-market as much as I could. But this interest of nursing was always there. So I think that for example, that last position I held, which was a safety signal coordinator, was actually heavily guided by my interest in nursing, because most of the people who serve in those positions at FDA are actually nurses. And I can see after being in school for some time now why that fits, but they often are surveilling different adverse events that are actually mandatorily reported to FDA after a device is marketed. So that's, I'm not sure if everyone was aware of that, but oftentimes, if any adverse event happens with a marketed device, it should be reported to FDA. So if there were certain trends in those reports, the safety signal coordinator would develop a team to try to figure out like a root cause analysis of why that could be happening, and if any sort of action had to be taken. So that would often include things like communicating with the public that there is a safety concern related to a device. So I hope that helps. That's a very specific example, but I hope that helps answer your question.
Thank you.
Kellyanne, thanks for your talk. I have a question about the companies who sort of avoid the FDA by moving to Europe, doing their trials there. Do you have any comments on that? It's easier, quote unquote, and less expensive to get a CE mark or clearance. What would you say about that?
So I would say that I often sometimes saw within submissions or when talking to different companies that they would say like, we're already CE marked, or we're already doing this study in Europe, or something like that. But actually, oftentimes that was helpful if it did provide some preliminary data, especially in the clinical trial space. However, it wasn't enough for us to really feel comfortable that it would support safety and effectiveness of a device, because healthcare systems are different in different countries. So I think that that's something that, and also patient populations can be different in different countries. So that was always something that it was something we considered, but didn't always hold a ton of weight. In terms of submitting to other countries over FDA, I wish that wouldn't happen, I guess, but I do think that FDA is trying their best to just keep people within the US by applying these burdensome principles, as well as using the interactive review process as much as possible to try to help make it clear that FDA is there to collaborate with you while you're on this journey. And I can actually mention that, like, when I first started at FDA as a reviewer, that was when the interactive review process had just started a little bit more. So really, oftentimes the communications from FDA was primarily either through email or written form. But then as I was being trained, there was often an emphasis to really just pick up the phone and have a teleconference with the company. And also there's been a big push for pre-submissions as well. So that's always a nice free option for companies to engage with the FDA early. So I think that these are ways that FDA has tried to keep people within the US.
Yeah, I've been to 3 or 4 Q-sub meetings, but never advanced beyond that. I found the FDA people to be extremely knowledgeable, serious about what we were talking about, and very helpful, actually, particularly after the meeting was over. Kellyanne, that's why it's good to go in person. But still, for an inventor, you're always in a hurry. You make something interesting, and then it takes 3 or 4 years to get it into the market. A lot of us find that problematic, to say the least. So it would be nice if somehow the process were a lot simpler if the device is not dangerous. I agree, if it's dangerous, okay, sure. But we have, for example, built a watch which measures simple vital signs and produces a number between 0 and 1, the probability that you're hemorrhaging. It's not dangerous, it's a smartwatch, but it's probably going to require trials, and maybe trials on people who may be hemorrhaging, which means it will take 3 to 5 years to accumulate enough data. And so by that time, most of us will have lost interest in the device altogether. That's a bit of a problem, I think. The long time frame, the relatively high cost, makes it difficult for a small company to progress.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna say thank you for sharing that perspective. And I'll note that I think in terms of the data collection for clinical trials, that I'm not sure if that's necessarily a requirement that is only singular to FDA. Like as I mentioned, reimbursement and other things like that will also require that information. And I think that it is kind of unfortunate how long these things can take, but these are other factors that are beyond everyone's control. For example, these studies take a long time because enrollment, sometimes it's really hard to get patients enrolled. And that's why I also mentioned, like, if there's ways for you to get, I guess, clinical stakeholders involved and try to help, they can help with the recruitment of those studies, then I think that that's one way to try to at least help, I guess, improve that factor. But that definitely is an unknown factor that's really hard to control. Additionally, in terms of the cost, there are, I'm not sure if I included it on my list of resources, but there actually is a difference in price for different submissions for smaller companies. So that is a resource. If I didn't provide it before, I can provide it later. But that is one way also that FDA does try to help early innovators in terms of their pursuits to getting devices on the market.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. The discount for small companies. It's really the cost of trials. So if for example, for this device I was talking about, if the FDA says, look, you have to test it on people who may in fact be hemorrhaging, we'll never be able to do that. It would take years. And so the device would just disappear. And so I don't know how to, so I'll know next week on October 27th, if they say those words, then we'll move on and work on something else, because that'll be the end of the project.
I see. Well, yeah, I mean, that's definitely an interesting, I can see the technical concern there. And I think that perhaps your group can also consider alternatives or justifications that you can provide to FDA. Like I mentioned, like I'm not sure if, maybe you've already gone through this route, but it's just maybe you can look into animal studies and trying to justify how certain animal studies could really represent that type of model.
Yeah, we've looked into almost all of those things. So yeah, we have fallback positions. But the concern I said is the one that really worries me the most. But hey, I'll know in 7 days, so who cares?
Well, I'm wishing you luck, and I'm guessing that's a teleconference with FDA, unfortunately, right? So rather than in person, but hopefully it goes well.
Yeah. So my friends at the hospital telling me that nurses are quitting in droves. Have you seen this kind of impact in School of Nursing?
I've actually heard the opposite, where there's a lot of people who have felt called and to join the nursing workforce. So actually, I think, and I also heard this about medical schools as well, that they're experiencing a higher increase in enrollment for these programs.
That's good. Thanks very much.
Sure.
Ty, did you have a question? Oh, sorry. I think Ty, did you have a hand?
Yes, yeah, I have a question. Yeah, first of all, thank Kellyanne for the presentation. I have a question about because I know like two popular pathway for medical device approval, like a PMA or PMN. So like those the clinical evidence requirement is the most have for each pathway, like for PMA and PMN.
Correct. Or I understand your question. And by PMN, just to help clarify for everyone, he's saying pre-market notification, which is also another way to say 510K submissions.
Yep.
Technically, clinical data requirements are not usually required for the pre-market notification or 510K pathway, but however, sometimes it is. So that's why, as Neo and I kind of alluded to, sometimes it's not always black and white. So as I mentioned, typically it's not required, but I am aware of various 510Ks that have required clinical data for their submission. PMAs almost always require clinical data. And there's another pathway, the de novo pathway, which is for a moderate to low risk device. And those tend to not have a predicate. Those oftentimes will require clinical data as well, but there are some occasions where they may not.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Sure.
Hi, I had a question also. Thanks for giving us your helpful tips. And I was wondering if it was possible to get information from previous trials and study designs that have been approved. And how actually, I've heard that because of the Freedom of Information Act, that's supposed to be possible, but also it seems like not everybody would want to just willingly share that. So how does that work?
Right, correct. So I think in terms of what was actually submitted to FDA, you would have to do a Freedom of Information request for the IDE submissions or the clinical trials that may be under an IDE. But some other ways that are not FDA related that you could consider looking for clinical trial data would be through clinicaltrials.gov. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I guess so. I haven't looked, and I haven't been able to find like the detailed study data in there, just kind of the overall synopsis.
Yeah, I think that's my next suggestion, since other than the Freedom of Information Act, because I understand that it could take a while for those type of requests, but yeah, clinicaltrials.gov, as well as any potential publications that might come from research groups.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up? Well, thank you so much, Kellyanne. That was really informative.
Sure, no problem. Happy to be here. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Wonderful, thank you. And then next time, this is our next meetup on November 11th at 4 p.m. We have Scott Talbot and Jeremy Binstock from Cooley LLP. They will talk about intellectual property for medical devices, and they're also generously offering office hours a week later. So I'll start advertising this soon, and I hope to see you all there. Awesome, thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, Mayo.
Bye.